problem. But I'll tell you, that's the deed to the land I talk about. Somebody just said, that's the problem. That's the one I told you I would put on the record. I said, yeah, I got it. Oh, you got it. Exactly today. I hear you.
All right. All right. Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
All right. We appreciate everybody coming out this evening for our. I need to use this mic. That's good. That better? All right. Appreciate everyone coming out this evening to attend this cooperating agency scoping meeting. And this is associated with the Bear Creek Watershed assessment project for the Madison County Bear Creek Watershed. This project would not be possible without the funding from NRCS that is being administered through the Mississippi Soil and Water Conservation Commission. So we're grateful for the opportunity to be able to advance this important project. My name is Darian Warren, and I serve as a project manager for Wagner Engineering, who was selected as the engineers to work with NRCS, Soil and Water Conservation, and Madison County, who is the local sponsor, to develop this project. So we're here tonight. We wanted to invite as a part of this effort, we wanted to invite all of the public agencies to discuss the goals and objectives and the scope as it relates to this particular project, and just make sure that all of the agencies are aware of the purpose of the project, see what comments or questions that you may have as it relates to your internal processes and how it may touch the different phases of this project and how we advance the project. So we know that this is going to be a collaborative effort. So we want to make sure that we follow all of the requirements in terms of coordinating and making sure that all of the agencies are aware of what's to take place as we continue to move forward with this planning process. And so before we get into the presentation, we want to recognize, I know we have a lot of representatives from our state and federal agencies, but we also want to recognize, I know we have at least one elected official in the audience right now, and that's Mayor Dr. Truly for the city of Canton. I don't know, do we have any mayors, city of Gluckstadt, Madison here right now? Okay, all right. All right, so we want to thank them for coming out as well. And so at this time, I want to turn it over to, we have two Board of Supervisors here with us this afternoon. This evening, we have Gerald Steen, who is the District 3 Supervisor for Madison County, and he serves as the Board President. And we also have Carl Banks, who is the District 4 Supervisor. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Supervisor Steen and let him welcome you. And then following Supervisor Steen, he'll bring up Supervisor Banks, where he'll talk about the importance of this project and how we got here.
All righty. Thank you, Darian. Just appreciate each one of you being here tonight. It's very important for discussion and communication to happen tonight on this project that the county has been working on now a couple of years. And we have been very, very much able, with the help of Mr. Espy, actually our county attorney, to work with different agencies to be able to get some money. By the way, I'm Gerald Steen, Board President for District 3. But with that, we just appreciate each one. And please put your comments in, put your thoughts in after you listen and understand, because this will affect the whole county. In some form, it will affect the whole county in a very positive manner. And we appreciate the agencies working with us to be able to make this happen. And as Mr. Banks will say here in a second, that this will not happen overnight either. We all know, sitting in this room, that things of this nature, this magnitude, takes time, a lot of communications between each other. And so we're here as a board member, wanting to continue to move this project forward to where we can help Madison County as a whole. Mr. Banks, would you come up and just kind of explain a little bit of the importance of it?
I appreciate that. Thank you, Gerald. Thank you all for being here. My name is Carl Banks, District 4 Supervisor. I sit out for a few years from being supervisor, but I've been supervisor here since 1984, and we've had flooding in the Canton area for a long time. I asked our engineers, what can we do? What can we do to solve this issue? Because we're getting too much flooding. It seems to be more flooding than it was in the past, especially in our Canton area, which, of course, is in the watershed of Bear Creek. Now, he proposed, well, why don't we do a watershed study? Took it back to the board, asked the board, say, can we fund the watershed study? And we got an affirmative vote to fund the watershed study. We funded that study, and it took them about a year when they completed the study, and we were able to get that information. Our attorney, Mike Espy, was able to meet with someone and pass that study on to NRCS. And from there, the funding started, because we made the step to find out what was going on, and we also know that we can put in the engineering and to create the changes. And hopefully, we're trying to make a change that's going to be a change for the future that will be in place for a long time. Because as we grow, we keep impacting our watersheds. So we've got to understand when we take in another subdivision, what is that subdivision going to drain into, and what is it going to create downstream and downstream again, trying to get to the different rivers that we're between, Pearl River, Big Black River. What is going to be affected? So in what we're trying to do now, I would hope that we are looking at long-term in terms of the board accepting subdivisions and drainage and how they impact what goes on in a town like Canton that's been here for years and years and been flooding for years and years. And now we seem to know why, and we're going to be putting in corrections that will hopefully eliminate the flooding. My Canton is separated by District 4 and District 5 are the two supervisors that within Canton and have authority with Canton. District 4 has a lot of flooding, and I'm the supervisor of District 4, and I feel responsible. If I don't get it done, who will? And that's my job, is to try to work toward eliminating flooding in Canton. And with you all's help, we can make that happen. And I appreciate all of y'all for coming. And I appreciate all that's been done up to this point by our engineers and also by our federal partners and our state partners. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Supervisor Steen and Supervisor Banks. One thing that I failed to do, as I mentioned, we have several representatives in the room, but as already been stated, this will not be possible without the funding from NRCS and Soil and Water. So I would like to take this time to recognize Nick Ivey, who is the Executive Director of the Mississippi Soil and Water Conservation Commission. And also I'd like to recognize the State Engineer for NRCS, Ogie Lewis, who's in the back of the room. So we'd like to thank those gentlemen for their support and continued guidance through this process. So we'll continue forward with we have an agenda. The next item is to give you a project overview. And so we have several members from Wagner Engineering and the AJA management team. If you all would raise your hands real quick. Wagner, AJA. So as we go through this presentation, at the end we'll have question and answers. So the technical team will be here to help facilitate and answer any questions that may come up. So at this time, we're going to bring up Robert Anderson, who is our senior water resource engineer, and he's going to give an overview of the project as we move forward.
Good evening. Good evening. Good to be here. Ogie, I feel for you. This is a big project we're taking on. It seems like we're going to introduce many more in the near future. But Bear Creek Watershed, let me say a little bit about myself first. I've been with Wagner for 5 months, so not very long, but I've really enjoyed the experience so far, and also working with AJA. It's been a pleasure to work with these folks. I have been retired 2 years before working for Wagner. Before that, I worked 32 years with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Roughly 16 of those years were as the state engineer in Tennessee, where I was over watershed operations, engineering operations, dam rehabilitation, emergency watershed protection. It was enjoyable work. I enjoyed doing that, and I was tired, so I retired. So now I'm back to work. So here we go. Let's talk about Bear Creek. Yes, Bear Creek is. There are definitely flooding issues in Bear Creek. We're going to talk about some of that. We're going to talk about some of the facts that affirm that and will help us acquire more NRCS funding in the future. We've done a lot of welcome introductions. The meeting purpose is to talk about flood damage reduction in Bear Creek. Here are some of the folks that Darian's already introduced. Kurt Reedus, the State Conservation with NRCS in Mississippi, and Ogie Lewis, the State Conservation Engineer. He's also the Program Manager for Watershed Operations in Mississippi. Sponsor, Madison County Board of Supervisors. Thank you for the comments that you guys made. You're right on target with what's been going on, I believe. Nick, Ivy, and Brad Shedd with Mississippi Soil and Water Conservation Commission, and then the technical contractors, Wagner and AJA. We want to go through and review the status of the work up till now for Bear Creek. In addition to what we've done, there's been the Madison Stormwater County Plan that was done that was used to acquire NRCS funding. We have that. We want to step through the kind of NRCS planning process because it's a complex process, and I want to share a little bit of that with you because it's going to demonstrate why it's going to take a little bit of time to get this plan done. We are starting this scoping process. We need feedback from you guys, from agencies, regarding the different resource issues that we'll encounter in Bear Creek. And I think it's really, really important that we have the local people giving us feedback on these resource issues. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. Also, we'll be mentioning some potential solutions, potential alternatives near the end, and then the overall public participation process. Here is the Bear Creek Watershed. It's also on the 3 boards in the back. You can take a look at that after the meeting if you like. But Bear Creek lies within Madison County. If you turn around and look at that center map, that kind of shows you how Bear Creek lies in Madison County. It's basically divided up into 4 sub-watersheds: Tilda Bogue, Bear Creek, Little Bear, Bear Creek, Upper Bear Creek, and Tilda Bogue. Those 4 watersheds make up the big watershed of Bear Creek. NRCS follows a 9-step planning process. This is not 9 steps, but it's a summation of those 9 steps. Any planning that NRCS does, whether it's with a local farmer or a community for a watershed plan, these are the steps that NRCS follows. This project is funding through Public Law 566, which was established in 1954 by the 83rd Congress. And there was a period of time when PL 566, Public Law 566, thrived. And there was a lot of flood control projects done. This is back in the 60s and 70s. There was also a lot of drainage projects done, channelization, you know, speeding up the water and getting it to the outlet. A lot of that was done back in the 60s and 70s by NRCS with a sponsor, which was usually a group of farmers. A lot of dams were built, a lot of flood control dams. So the steps of planning: identify problems and concerns, determine objectives. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the NEPA process and PR&G and explain what that is here in a minute. Inventory the resources. We're kind of at that stage right now with Bear Creek where we're getting a handle on what the resources are. We're running some computer models, Corps of Engineer models that will help us look at things a little bit more closely and arrive at some alternatives for consideration. Okay. Public Law 566 helps federal, state, local, and tribal governments protect and restore watersheds. For the eligible purposes, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, it provides financial and technical assistance for these three phases. We are in planning right now with Bear Creek. The next phase will be design. The next phase after that, which is not funded at this point, will be construction. The primary purpose for Bear Creek will be flood prevention. These other purposes that you see down below that are also can be funded through the Public Law 566 program. But we're going to do this under flood prevention, which incidentally provides the most federal dollars for these purposes. Okay, then it gets complex. NRCS, not only do they have to follow their watershed planning policies and guidance, they have to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act, which was established in 1970 by President Nixon. And that's basically where we look at all the environmental considerations, the impacts, the alternatives on the environment. And we'll take a look at what some of those are here in a minute. PR&G is the principles, requirements, and guidelines. I'm not sure why it's called that, but it's basically the economics. And when we get to the alternative that's selected for Bear Creek, the solution, it has to meet a certain benefit-cost ratio. So we'll be looking at the policy, the law regarding PR&G as we go through this process. What is scoping? That's just this is a definition from the Council of Environmental Quality, which all of our regs are approved by. It's the range of actions, alternatives, and impacts that are going to be considered in this project. It's having open communication with the local community, with the affected agencies for Bear Creek. Project purpose and needs. We've said this over and over, and this has been really identified up till now is flood damage reduction. We've got to get some better flood control, particularly in the city of Canton. A secondary purpose will be water quality management. As a result of flood damage reduction, by addressing that issue, we're going to naturally get some water quality benefits when we do that. We're mainly looking at nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment, dissolved oxygen, mainly those water quality characteristics. Okay, talking about identifying resource concerns. These are some of the concerns that we're going to be focused on throughout this project. Those resource concerns that affect the human environment, and the big one being public health and safety. You know, it's always a mess. It's always a big recovery effort when you have a flood in the community, and what the folks have to go through. So that's going to be a big one that we address. Land use and planning. Mr. Banks mentioned some zoning things that need to be considered going forward. I think it's going to be very important, particularly when you look at some of the maps we got back here. And then here's some other, I'll let you look at some of that. Environmental justice, that's a big one. Economic efficiency, not so much air quality. And then we want to pay attention to SHPO, cultural and historic properties. We want to pay attention to that and make sure we're not interfering with those. And then the hazardous waste and materials. All these are affect the human environment. The natural environment, here are some of the resource concerns that we're going to be looking at as we go through this process in consideration of the alternatives that are developed. And by the way, if you think of any other resource concerns that are not listed here, please let us know. You can comment on that. Let us know kind of what we're missing. We need you guys helping us through this process. Wetlands and water resources, soils and geology, fish and wildlife resources, invasive species even, forest resources, floodplain management, riparian areas, wild and scenic rivers. I'm not sure we have any in Bear Creek, but I'm new, so I need some help with that. So project needs, reduce the duration and level of flooding. That's what we're all about right now. Reduce the corresponding flood-related losses to people, land, and property. And then, as I said before, improve water quality. I'm not sure if I know how to make this work right now with this little gadget, but this is a flow direction. This is Bear Creek, and I'm going to click the button, and you're going to see the little flow arrows show you the direction of flow. So if a raindrops hits right here, guess where it's going to go? It's going to follow this right down all the way to the exit of Bear Creek and Big Black River. Yeah, help me with that. There you go. That's hard to see, but you can kind of see the little arrows moving downstream in each one of the sub-watersheds. So how do we reduce that? That's a big thing that we're going to be working on. How do we slow the speed of that water down and keep it from flooding downstream around the city of Canton? Okay. Next. That's also on the big poster board in the back. Okay, so let's talk about flooding problems. I'm not sure how many of you have heard about some of these flooding problems or are aware of them, but urban development has been a big contributor to increased runoff in the watershed. This is demonstrated with this GIS graphic. If you notice in this first photo, you don't see too many bright spots in 2001. But then you move 20 years or 18 years later down the road, see all the bright spots? There's Nissan. Nissan is about a mile long and half a mile wide of impervious area. In other words, whatever hits there is going to run off and go into Bear Creek. So we're going to be looking at something else along those lines into the future here in a second. This is currently, right now, according to FEMA, the FEMA floodplain data, there are approximately 1,400 buildings within the 100-year floodplain. To me, that speaks volumes of the condition right now. We've got some big issues with zoning. So I think we need to take a look at that, address some of those issues through the process of this plan. If you want to see a blow up of this, you can really see the number of houses, buildings that are affected by the 100-year floodplain right now. There's businesses next to I-55 that are potentially flooded by the 100-year floodplain. You have a big zone of yellow dots here, which means these structures are in the 100-year floodplain. There's some areas in Gluckstadt that are yellow, some buildings or residences that are in the 100-year floodplain. That's a problem. That's a problem, and we're going to try to address that through the process of this plan. Thanks, Darian. You have historical records. That's when you look for stream gauge data, it's usually pretty common to find it. What we found around here was in Bentonia. There was a USGS gauge station, and if you interpolate some of the data from this, you can track it back upstream to Bear Creek and see how it affects things. But it correlates well with the flooding problem. This happens to be historic crest, and of the past 22 historical crests, the top 22 historical crests, 5 have come in the past 4 years. Whether it's climate change, whether it's global warming, believe what you want to believe, but flooding is increasing across the United States. Intensity of rainfall is increasing. You're getting more rainfall with a shorter event, so it really produces a lot of flooding. What I wanted to say was, excuse me, I'll get here right. Just down below these 22 is your event that occurred in August of 22. So it's right there close to the top historic crest. Here's some other flooding problems. Some of these were identified in the Madison Stormwater County Plan. It was put together, I think, in 2022, summer 2022. Damaged stormwater infrastructure. I mean, there's several sites that were identified in that plan. New developments and associated stormwater impacts from those developments. Even a lot of the streams in the watershed that were straightened, whenever they were straightened, increase the speed of the water to go downstream and really have an effect on downstream infrastructure and communities. Agriculture's adversely impacted. There's increased maintenance and recovery costs as a result of this flooding. Increase in flood insurance and loss of property value. So these are some of the things that we're documenting in the watershed plan. Economic damage to residences, commercials, industrial, and several other things there. Health and safety is a big issue with residents in the inundated areas. Emergency services are delayed by water over the road and bridges. This has happened, I believe, Mr. Banks, you said this over and over and over, and I think that's right on. You've seen it. And then the water quality thing, we really are looking for the best model to look at the water quality situation. There is an impaired 303D listed stream for aquatic life use support. So we'll be looking at how we can address that issue and improve the water quality in the watershed. Okay, some of the solutions we call this opportunities. These are some of the things that we're going to be looking at as solutions as we go forward. We may look at these as solutions in subwatersheds as we go forward. So that's just something we're thinking about. But a big one is, of course, flood storage. When an RCS builds a flood storage dam, they store the 100-year flood in the structure before it goes out before it goes out the emergency spillway. So that's a practice that we'll be looking at. A stream channel restoration, improvement. There's a whole slew. It's 140 conservation practices that NRCS implements through their numerous programs that can be done in this particular watershed to slow down the water, to help the rainfall infiltrate a little bit better. Participation in the community rating system. I think most of you are familiar with that. Enhanced development patterns and regulations are some things that we need to look at. Maybe a flood warning system, flood proofing of certain buildings or industrial facilities. Floodplain and wetland acquisition. There are opportunities to acquire that with federal programs, which is the same for perpetual easements. And then sediment reduction measures. So as we move forward, we're going to be looking at several alternatives. These alternatives are required by the overlapping requirements of PL 566, of NEPA, of the PR&G. A lot of the requirements in those three different laws or regulations overlap each other, but all of them require that we look at a no-action alternative. And we're also going to look at a no-action alternative if we do nothing 50 years down the road. So we're going to be projecting into the future, and we're going to take a look at the hydrology of what it might look like if we keep at the pace we're going. We're going to have an agency-preferred alternative and other reasonable alternatives, and then we got the NED, which is the National Economic Development Alternative, which is the alternative that has the best cost-benefit ratio. So the next steps is to keep collecting and analyzing existing human and environmental resource concerns. We do this through what NRCS calls the environmental evaluation, which they use a form called CPA 52 to look at these different things. We're going to, like I said, establish a future without the project condition. And we're going to start developing alternatives to reduce flooding. And once we have those at a 30% design level, we'll probably have another meeting to review that. And then we're going to prepare and evaluate potential environmental consequences of the alternatives, and then release the draft DA for public review and comment. And then determine the need for further evaluation and study, and then a decision document, which is a document that says with this environmental plan or assessment, we find no significant impact of the alternative that's selected. If we find significant impact issues with the alternatives, then we have to go to another phase, according to NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, of an environmental impact statement, which is much more detailed and involved. So schedule and timeline, this is kind of what we're looking at. Planning, the environmental assessment that we're working on, the watershed plan, it's going to take another 12 to 15 months. And then there'll be a design phase for the structures that are designed for the alternative that's selected. And then another probably 24 to 36 months for construction of those practices. So that kind of gives you an idea of the time frame we're looking at here, and it's nothing quick. It's nothing quick. Construction is contingent upon PL 566 funding.
On that point, Mr. Banks wanted to make a comment.
Yeah,
No.
the funding, we received the funding.
Yes, sir. We received the funding. The way I understand it, correct me. We received funding for developing the watershed assessment or the watershed plan, and also the funds to design the structures.
And construction.
So,
We don't have that in our contract with you guys yet. We don't do that.
oh, so they got it. Well, that's good news.
The funds that is approved, yeah, we're good.
Good deal.
We're good.
So forget what I said. We may need more. I'll just say that. You never know.
Now, the local sponsor is responsible for construction. So we got 2.5 plus 1.6, 4 million for planning and design, the remains for construction through Madison County Board of Supervisors. That's how we understood it. So we've gotten 25 million.
Okay, so, all right,
Pretty much. Right?
get some clarification.
Yeah, 23.5.
Yeah.
Okay. How to submit comments? Email bearcreekinfo@wagnerengineering.co. There we go. Or you can mail them to this address. Here's the contact information. Darren's the Senior Project Manager. Brad Shedd, Bureau Director for Mississippi Soil and Water Conservation Commission. And Ogie Lewis with the NRCS. Okay. Any questions?
But at this time, actually, you heard the presentation, I heard the background in terms of the purpose of the project. You heard the overview. So at this time, we want to open up for any questions. We talked about any resource concerns as it relates to coordination with, the agencies such as you all that are here tonight. I just want to hear any questions or concerns you may have or questions you may have based on the information you've heard so far from the information presented this evening. As mentioned, and we can pull that slide back up, we really want to encourage you, even with questions that are asked this evening, that you submit those questions, or you may need to go back and talk with your counterparts in your various offices, but would like for you to submit those questions to the email address that was shown on the slide, so we can log those questions and provide an official response, so that we can make sure that we're moving forward properly. So at this time, we just want to open it up for any questions that you may have based on the project itself or information that you've heard this evening. Yes.
Darren, I would like to put back up on the slide on the time to get to construction. And kind of explain that a little clearer, and where we are now
So
in that period of time.
So right where we are now, in terms of the planning and design phases, our contract, in terms of planning and design, we began, I believe it was December, where we initiated the process. So we're early in the planning stages of the project. One of our milestones that we had to accomplish was to host this cooperating agencies meeting, scoping meeting, which is what we're having right now. Like I said, to initiate the coordination efforts that may be necessary with the state and federal agencies that may have some level of involvement at some point during this process. So as we continue to move forward, one of the next things that was already mentioned is in terms of evaluating, alternative solutions in terms of what the flood mitigation efforts could look like in terms of structures, locations, that sort of thing. So that would be the next key component in terms of where we are right now in this 12 to 15 month process. And then also the next step also will include having a public meeting where we invite the public, where the public is informed of the project and they can come in as well.
The most impervious part of the county is the southern part, meaning Madison as well as Ridgeland, which is rapidly developing the water essentially has no place to flow except toward, can you guys hear me? You can. Thanks. The water essentially has no place to flow except toward Canton. And so as we construct over the next 24 to 36 months, then economic development has not stopped and will not stop. So what is the adjustment as the construction in Madison and Ridgeland and Gluckstadt and hopefully in Canton, because it's ad infinitum. And so the interrogative posed here is, I guess, the preventive measures as it relates to the construction design as construction goes on in other parts of the county, and what is the planning for the adaptation as the construction and economic development goes on.
Okay.
If you will, we can answer that question, if you don't mind, answer where the water is actually started and going north and the water that's starting going south.
Yes, sir. We'll definitely do.
We'll answer that in-
Right. This is Zophie Damish. I'm with Wagner Engineering also. I'd like to point out that this is an excellent question. The watershed, the way it flows and the hydrology and the hydraulic connectivity of it, of course, the headwaters of it really originate right around the Reunion area, flows through northern Madison, city of Madison, and then it gets into the Gluckstadt area, works its way into Canton, and then all the way into the Big Black River. So it's pretty complex hydrology. And the question that you asked right there is really what we're trying to figure out. So imperviousness is really the key point here. We're looking at all types of measures to address the issue.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And you know, I talked about a future condition projecting 50 years out. If nothing is done, I think you'll be really shocked by what that's going to reveal if we continue at the pace we're at. But the hydraulics, it's called a HECRAS. It's a Corps of Engineers computer program. It requires a lot of inputs, but I think it's going to give us some good data to work from as far as what alternatives we propose. And I think we need to do some drastic things in the watershed to address the flooding issue. That's what my gut feeling is right now. Construction. I think we need to do a thorough, detailed study of not just the urban sector, but up in the agricultural setting areas to see what can be done in those areas to really check that water up before it gets downstream.
To kind of go back on Mayor Truby's question, you will be able to answer his question in the planning or the design stage.
I think when we get to a draft EA, we'll be getting there. We'll be able to answer that question. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think he also had the question of, all right, we've got the plan. Say this plan includes the detention pond on this 80-acre tract.
Mm-hmm.
Well, while we're doing all of this, that 80-acre tract is bought by a developer in a subdivision. Then we've got to go back and start modifying our plan as we go along. Am I on target, Mayor Truly?
Yes, you are. Because one of the biggest issue here is perpetual growth. And perpetual growth equals imperviousness. And I'm wondering if that equals to more water coming to Canton.
Yes.
So it does,
Yes.
okay.
That
So
means
I'm
more
trying-
water in Canton.
Right, so I'm trying to talk to the guys who are remarkably brighter than I am, who are the engineers here, as to a reasonable solution as we talk about this subject, because the growth just not gonna stop.
Well, yeah, and I'll reserve my opinion till a little bit later, till we do a little more study. And
Okay.
you're gonna do some things with stormwater, buy some people out maybe in the flood zone. Some of the things we looked at, and, you know, flood control high in the watershed, up in the reaches.
Then, you know, if we're gonna be planning, you've gotta factor in the rate of growth that we're currently seeing in Madison County, so that you'll know that, hey, if it takes us 5 years to put in these particular, type of reservoirs or whatever, then we need to probably figure there's gonna be X amount of growth, that's gonna require that facility or that particular, deterrent is larger than what we think we need right now today.
I think that's
So-
what he was getting at too, is that in this HECRAS model that he was talking about, there are some assumptions made based on growth over the next several years. They'll probably do it over a number of years, but those numbers are used to predict with all variables that you can try to estimate what's gonna happen over that time. And so this plan will take that into consideration as it's going forward. So that we're not gonna build it to what it would take to do today, but what we know is probably gonna happen in the future. Can't predict everything, certainly with the land sale kind of situation. That's the world we're in. We can't, I know the people working on this project can't control who buys the land. I'm sure there are some other avenues to control that in some ways, but make assumptions through the modeling to try to
I'll say this, we'll have,
take some of that into consideration. It doesn't sell it in this spot or that spot, but you know that by the time this thing is done, there's gonna be some impervious surface.
we will have a flood reduction goal. What percentage that is. How we can make that cost, how we make that cost benefit ratio work for us. So we are looking for a pretty good flood reduction for this watershed plan.
And I'll just say one other thing, and I personal opinion, take it for it is, but at some point, and they've mentioned it in this, we've got to look at zoning and not building things in a non-flood. Not good for economic development all the time, but it pay for that on the end, no matter what you do. That's a known flood plain. It's hard to come back and say, why did it flood? It was gonna flood. So I think it's working all these angles together, whether it be the permitting, the zoning, making the plan, all those things are gonna work together. And I think this plan will job of predicting those things.
With this plan, once it's constructed, will it most likely remove some land floodway now, floodplain? Or that's still your take?
As far as perpetual easements,
Well, just,
wetland,
no, this is land here as far as this.
I don't think so.
You don't think it would help reduce floodplain that we currently have?
No.
Okay.
I'm saying no right now, so.
Does Madison County sit on an earthquake fault?
Who's the geologist? Yeah, there's an old volcano.
It's not that far. I asked that question because not being an engineer, so I ask crazy questions as it relates to the project and the possibility. I guess the geologist would know whether, I know someone told me, maybe it's a fairy tale, that there's a fault that goes down from Memphis, from Mississippi, all the way to the Gulf Coast. Is that right?
Well, you got the New Madrid fault, which is up around West Tennessee, and I'm not sure how far down it extends.
How far does it go to our state?
Several
We've had
Several miles. I believe it, yeah. I mean, you've got the Natchez Trace on our ridge there, so, you know, usually where the water goes, there's something underneath there that.
Well, I guess I was just asking whether or not that's a concern as we build this.
I don't think it's going to be. Based on my knowledge of where faults are in the nation.
I don't believe any of the measures that'll be done in this plan that deep. I mean, these are surface type activities.
Well, in West Tennessee, we built a lot of public law 566 dams that weren't seismic protected. So whenever we rehabbed them through the dam rehabilitation program, we had to put in seismic features to protect the dam from something happening during an earthquake. And you can have a big one in the New Madrid. Any other?
Any other questions, comments? If not, one last item, we have.
The mic is dead, talking to the podium microphone.
One last item that we want to, or announcement. We have a sheet that before everyone leaves, there's a sheet where we're requesting data, information from each agency. And so before you leave, we'll make sure that we hand those out to each one of you so you can, if this information as it pertains to your agency, provide this to us, send it to us in the email provided. And this will be greatly appreciated. Anything else? Nick, Olga, you have anything you would like to say? You good? Nick, you good?
Yeah, just something about EWPP.
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate, and I'll just talk real quick about, NRCS, through the work of Mr. Espy and the Board of Supervisors, is providing these funds, and they are our partner. We have the same goals in mind as far as protection of our natural resources and flood protection. And so, as we administer this project, we just want to emphasize the fact that it is your project. You're trying to do what you need done, and so we want to make sure that you're involved every step of the way. We need comments, good, bad, and otherwise. And we're just happy that there's funding available that we can do these types of things throughout the state, and appreciate everybody that's done something to make this happen. To provide some help to those flooding areas. Really appreciate everybody that's involved with it. Appreciate Ogie making this thing happen, and we want to work better together. So let's form this partnership and try to get this project done. I appreciate it.
Yep. And just a quick update, Nick mentioned about working together, and just a good example of that. This is basically a long-term initiative by the Madison County Board of Supervisors. But in terms of working together, a short-term effort that was made by the Board of Supervisors, and in terms of good stewardship and collaboration and working together with the City of Canton, they pursued a grant through the NRCS Emergency Watershed Protection Program, EWP. And so the county was successful in obtaining those funds. It consisted of, there were five sites that were initially looked at. 3 of those sites were funded through NRCS. to address issues in terms of erosion that have been caused by flooding that have causing impacts to road infrastructure, utilities, and so that program is underway to move forward with that, to get that to construction. So, like as Nick mentioned, collaboration is important, and so the county has shown that and worked with the city of Canton, even on some short-term initiatives. So that's just an update to show in terms of the overall plan that the county started over a year ago, and just the efforts being made to initiate that program. So we just want to give a brief update on that program as well. So thank NRCS for that also.
My father farmed a lot of land on the Pildabode, the upper area of Pildabode back in the 60s and 70s. And he discussed with me years ago that there was a watershed project somewhere along that area that was discussed back then. Are you aware?
I'm not aware of that.
Is that a flood control dam that they talked about building? Or
Yeah, Watershed Lake.
Watershed Lake? We could probably look up and find that out. I don't have that information with me, but probably on file somewhere if there was a plan done at some point, because they did an EA, they did planning and probably design. If they didn't build it, obviously it wasn't constructed, but there should be.
That would be useful information.
All right.
I'll say something. I'm representing FEMA here tonight. I came to the regional office in Atlanta. One reason they sent me was because I spent my first 10 years going back to Mr. Espy's time as Secretary of Agriculture with NRCS. But, one of the things I always admired about NRCS was their ability to work with the soil water conservation commission through the districts and had a great local presence. Now, I retired and now I work for FEMA, came back and I supervise the risk analysis technical team in Atlanta. And FEMA has a lot of resources, and I was so impressed tonight to see your map there that shows how many houses are in the flood zone, how many are in the 100-year floodplain, how many are in the 500-year floodplain. I supervise the people that manage the CTP program, which CTP program, in Mississippi, we do all the flood mapping through grants to the state. And this goes through the Mississippi DEQ. Okay, and Suzanne, there she is. She brought out a good question. I wonder how many houses, she wants to see the severe repetitive and the repetitive losses, because she's curious if the maps are correct. In other words, do we have houses that flooded that weren't in the floodplain? So I think that's a very good question, and I told her, write that on a piece of paper and give me that question, and I'll hook her up with FMI. But that's one thing that FEMA offers is a 100-year floodplain mapping. Like I say, we work through partners just like NRCS. Our partners in Mississippi, we're fortunate. You never have too many partners, but we have two. The Mississippi Emergency Management Agency and Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you briefly about some of the opportunities that FEMA has. And some of you may be well aware of it. One is HMA grants, Hazard Mitigation Assistance grants. These grants are administered by MEMA. You need to contact your state hazard mitigation officer, Jana Henderson, and we may have somebody here from MEMA. Do we have anybody?
You do, you have
Yes, we
Jana.
have people from MEMA right here.
You have Jana.
I didn't know short time, so I don't know a lot of people. I think Jana's here. Jana administers these grants. These grants, and I'm sure she's probably got some going here. If you're in a 100-year floodplain, you might qualify to raise your house if it's technically feasible and the cost-benefit analysis works out. There may be an acquisition opportunity. Another wonderful grant program is drainage projects. If you have a road that's consistently flooding, put in for a grant, and you have to go through, make sure it's technically feasible and make sure that benefit cost analysis works out, but you can get a cost share agreement to raise the road. Okay, now, more important, FEMA has a new program they rolled out. It's called BRIC. It stands for Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. It is a competitive grant program. It is a very, very comprehensive program. And I think tonight y'all are touching on a lot of it. It works with municipalities, and they can update their ordinances and their stormwater ordinances. And then work toward building a more reliant, more resilient community over time. This BRIC program, I think, offers y'all a great opportunity. There's a publication that you can pull up, and I'll get your name of it. I would encourage everyone to take a look at this publication. It's called Building Community Resilience with Nature-Based Solutions, a guide for local officials. And if you just Google FEMA BRIC, you can read a lot about this program. But I think this is a great opportunity to overlay that program with what you are doing here. Another program, Tim is aware of this, and I looked in this basin on the National Inventory of Dams before I came here tonight, and there's 5 high-hazard dams in this basin. FEMA rolled out a program, and Willie McKercher is not here tonight. Willie McKercher is the Chief Dam Safety Officer in Mississippi. He works for Mississippi DEQ. You can work with Willie through this program, and Mississippi is a very, very progressive state in dam safety. You all have your own rehabilitation program. I think it's a 65-35 match. And y'all also participate in the HHPD program. You've got one dam that they're rehabilitating down in Hattiesburg. With this program, if a dam's eligible, there's a lot of criteria on it. But if it's like an NRCS, an old NRCS PL 566 dam, or a core dam, or dam on federal property, or a dam that's regulated by FERC, it would not be eligible. But I noticed, I think most of those dams, at least a couple of them I saw, were owned by HOAs. But this program has been funded on the national level at $800 million, with $75 million earmarked for dam removal. So there could be some potential there. So I'll mention that to you. And Willie McKercher with Mississippi DEQ is the Chief Dam Safety Officer, and he would be who I'll go through. Jana's over there, and I apologize, Jana, I want to meet you before I was trying to get over there and meet you, but she handles all the grants. And then another great resource you have in Mississippi is with DEQ is Steve Champlin. And Steve is the Geospatial Resources Division Flood Mapping Director, and he's with the Mississippi DEQ Office of Geology. So if you're looking for any type of flood information, he can provide you those products. And you also have a viewer online, the state does, through Steve's office. That is great, and I'm sure y'all probably use it to get a lot of that data. But with that said, any questions, I'll be here. I want to thank Jana for all that you all do. I know it's great to have partners like that. I know Jana, and then how many grants are you rolling out, Jana? You got a good many, I know.
I do. We have like 16, 17 disasters open. I absolutely was not going to say the thing because I just came to listen. But in addition to that, I am Jana Henderson, and I am with MEMA. I'm the Office Director of Mitigation. So not only am I responsible for mitigation grants, I'm responsible for floodplain management, and I'm also responsible for mitigation planning. So I heard a lot of things. I heard floodplain management a lot of times. My strong advice is to make sure that you're working with your local floodplain management administrator. There is someone that is assigned in my office to this area. Need to make sure that when you all get to that design, to that construction phase, that person has a seat at the table. Because, if you're talking about buying out structures, you're talking about maybe possibly trying to reroute water, then floodplain management really comes into play there, because we don't want you guys to do anything wrong to make you not in compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program. That's my strongest advice. The city of Canton did submit a brick project last year. It was not funded. It was also close. It met a lot of the elements for the brick program. However, they ran out of funding. We did encourage the city to resubmit that application this year, and they absolutely did. So we have our fingers crossed. What we did, we not only submitted it in brick, we submitted it in the FMA as well. So we're hoping, I do know that application review process has started. It started the 1st of March. So hopefully we'll get to hear something. I don't know if it's, hopefully we'll get to hear something soon. So that was kind of quick, but my strongest advice is to make sure that you're working with your local floodplain administrator. You have one for the county, you have one for the city, and you have a specialist that is assigned to this area in our office. Nice to meet you.
Great job, man. I cannot stress what she said. I noticed outside on your wall, you're in the process of updating your mitigation plan. Ask for comments out there on that plan. So make sure you give your comments, because everything starts at the local level and rolls up. And as Jenna just mentioned, your local floodplain administrator is golden. Please, find out who that person is and go through that person, because your compliance in the flood insurance program is relying on your mitigation plan. So be very proactive, and I know tonight we have a lot of people in the community that have a lot of influence, and you know a lot of people that are suffering. So if there's a way that they can get a grant and help them out, please reach out to your local hazard mitigation office.
Thank y'all for those comments. Are there any others?
Everybody signed in, and we're gonna get the information about Jana's contact and
Yes, sir.
everyone's contact, right?
Yes, sir. We'll share the sign-in sheet with everyone, so we'll have everyone's contact info.
That's good.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem. If nothing else,